Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Insidious Disease After Death, out October 30th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 10 tracks, 43 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. This band is made up of current and former members of Dimmu Borgir, Nile, Morgoth, Suspiria, and Napalm Death. So there's a lot of talent and know-how in this band in order to pull together a record that feels and sounds like this, which is an old-school death metal album. And that old school feel is not just present in the sound, it's present in the structure. And I felt that works very well for this album. It has that old school presence. It's a very balanced, cohesive, linear record from a structural perspective. What you get at the beginning is exactly what you're going to get at the end. It's an album that doesn't offer any deviations. It just walks you down this narrow, straight path from the first song to the last song. And you need that for an album that has this sort of sound approach. You don't want the album to feel broken. You don't want the album to feel like it's taking you in a direction that you don't want to go. You want to feel a cohesiveness. You want to feel like there is a balanced approach from the first to the last song. So what you're going to get at the beginning is exactly what you're going to get throughout the experience of listening to this record. Now, from an overall sound perspective, I love the mixing that they did for this record. There's not one element that jumps into the forefront that you could say that this is the driving force behind the album. Everybody's on the back seat, and this element is really pushing the sound and the energy of the record forward. It's not the case here. Everything worked in parallel or in unison with each other in order to provide you with a rich sounding outcome for the album. You could really feel all the different elements at play on every single song, and you feel like they have an equal part in how that song comes across and how it sounds and how it feels and how it plays out to the listener. To me, that experience was very important for this record. It really allowed the album to just feel very leveled across all different parameters. When you dive deeper into the sound, I felt like we really have to address two different issues here, or at least two different elements that really push that sound forward and that create that experience that this album has to offer. And that is the guitars and drums. And that's not to say that the bass doesn't play a role, because I really felt that the bass overall on this record was not hidden at all. You could really feel it on the tracks. It adds grooviness at times, it adds darkness. It just has a really interesting balance when it's put together with these two other elements. But when you look at the overall picture within the sound itself, it's definitely an album that's driven by the combination of drums and guitars. At least they have a slight predominant role, because I really feel like it's leveled across all elements, including vocals, but those two elements together really become the main force, if you will. The bass kind of pushes it, or pushes them a little bit slightly ahead, but very slightly ahead. But the guitars on this album are very driven. I love the sound that they have. They're melodic at times, they're heavy in others. There's some grittiness to the sound and how they come across as well. But they partner perfectly with how the drums sound. So the drums gave the guitars the perfect bass line, the perfect foundation. Heavy at times as well, driven in others, more melodic, taking more of a little of a sidestep, if you will, but never trying to overcome the guitars the same way the guitars never tried to overcome the drums. The two just really come together perfectly to create this very rich sounding experience across all 10 tracks. When you look at the lyrics, because I feel like this is an album that you really have to pay attention to the lyrics. It's not necessarily always the case with death metal, but for this specific record, I feel like if you can take something away from the lyrics and at the very least, pay attention to what the lyrics have to offer, I think it adds a different level. It just takes the enjoyment of the album to that next step, and it really progresses the record from an overall perspective. I like the topics on the lyrics of this record. They're interesting. At least they make you think. They talk about conspiracy theories, death, life after death, the perception between what's happening, reality and fantasy. So all of these different topics really have a common denominator, if you will, across the album. This is not a concept record, but there's definitely a theme to it. And that theme, while giving you perhaps a different look into it on every single song, still connects all the tracks together because there are some commonalities across them. Vocally, the record is very balanced as well, same as the structure, same as the vocals. And they fit perfectly with the overall sound experience that this album has to offer. I felt that they nailed it on every track. They brought grittiness, they brought heaviness, they brought aggression, they brought intensity, and they have just the perfect delivery, the perfect tone to really put the cherry on top, if you will, of how this album comes across and how these songs become so powerful. Overall, this is a solid death metal album top to bottom. There are some songs that offer a little bit of a more melodic approach, almost pushing the tracks into a more melodic death metal arena, but overall I felt that this was really a classic death metal record that has all the perfect components built into them. Vocals, lyrics, the way the guitars sound, the drums, the partnership between the two of them, all of these elements really came together to create a very strong and straightforward death metal record. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I want to start off with Soul Excavation. This is the opening track, and it's my favorite track on the album. I love it. There's a built-up intro into it, so it's a perfect way to get the album started. The intro is not very long, so they didn't have to break it off of the song. They allowed the song to have the intro built into it, and it starts off in the best way possible. The guitars have a thick sound, they're driven, they're heavy. The drums add perception to the overall sound experience. They just add a little bit of the foundation that the guitars really needed, and then the two just pair up together to give you this really rich experience. The raspy vocals give the song a little bit of grittiness, and I felt like it needed. The guitars had a little bit of it at times, but the vocals added a lot more of it, and it became more consistent in that approach throughout. This is a song where you can definitely hear the bass. There's a lot of grooviness coming from it, and it adds a substantial, pleasurable nuance into how the song comes across. There is a great solo on this track, really old school, over the top. It adds darkness, melody. It has a different vibe from how the rest of the track sounds, but at times it almost feels like it breaks the track. It gives you at least a pause. But that it works well on this song because it allows everything that came before and everything that comes after to sound even heavier, even more powerful, if you will, more brutal. So it just gives a lot more strength to the overall construction of the track with that break, with that solo, and how different it sounds from the rest of the track. Next, Divine Fire, dark melodic riff to start off. Very sinister opening, and I was really hoping that they were not going to waste that sinister atmosphere on that riff in the opening. I was really hoping that this was going to be something that they were going to come back around to as the song progresses, because it gave such an interesting atmosphere to the track. It would be almost a waste to just use it at the beginning and then completely get rid of it for the rest of the song. I like the fact that the song after that intro kicks in into a next year, it increases the tempo, and then I was really pleasurably surprised when I found out that that opening comes back around again, and you're going to get it more in the middle of the track. So there's a full circle. There's this sense of not just wasting it at the beginning, but continue with that atmosphere, that sinister, dark atmosphere that plays very well into the lyrics of the track. It allows the song to really come to life. It allows the song to have a little bit more meaning, a little bit more power, a little bit more strength, not just musically and vocally, but lyrically as well. And then how those three elements tie in together. Last but not least, Invisible War. Love this track, perhaps my second favorite track on the album behind Soul Excavation. Really dynamic. The guitars have great sound perspective to it. Brutal at times the way this track comes across. The drums add a lot of essence to that brutality. The guitars have it already, but when you mix the drums into it, it just becomes even more noticeable. And I love the partnership between the two. The bass is really important in this track as well. It has a great role to create foundation, to create darkness, to add to that overall vibe that the song has already. It doesn't add necessarily more brutality to the sound, but adds this grooviness to this underlying bass line that really makes the song feel even more powerful and more dynamic as it moves along. And that is, to me, an important component of this track. Another important component is how hooky and how catchy this track is, showing that you can create a brutal track, heavy, fast-paced, dynamic, changing from more methodic approaches to a lot faster approaches, and still be hooky and catchy. That doesn't take anything away from the brutality of the track, from how heavy this song is and how it was put together. This is it, guys. Insidious Disease, After Death, out October 30th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.